Okay, there we go. Now we're talking. All right, let's wait for a few people to get here. Hey, Mr. Lunatic, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello, hello, can y'all hear me? Can you hear me? Nobody? Can you hear me? No? No audio? Okay, good. All right. Now, what I also want to make sure is, can
Your
you hear
opinion in
this?
Kanter
I'm only going to play a few seconds.
Goes farther than
one,
Justice Scalia in
if you
Heller.
can hear
In fact,
Senator
you
Blumenthal.
characterized it.
Okay, great, good. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started then. Here's what I'm gonna do. I am going to, so I wanted to talk about this, some of the stuff going on today with the hearing involving Amy Coney Barrett. And one of the things that I noticed that I had heard was that this douchebag, Senator Blumenthal, was going over the some of Amy Coney Barrett's cases, specifically the Kanter v. Barr case.
So Kanter versus Barr was a case in which the defendant, well, he had been convicted of Medicaid fraud. He had stolen, he had sold shoe inserts that did.
So during the hearing today, of course, all the Democrats are being crazy and they're talking about emotions and what they feel about. Okay, I'll make sure I remember that. All right. Hopefully I can get this thing. I'm learning how to do this new software, and I'm sure some people have seen it done before in different ways, but I'm trying to do this a much different way. I've also got a green screen back here that eventually I'm going to be able to use so that I don't have this weird backdrop and all that kind of stuff. Let's get this started. Senator Blumenthal, and I'm only going to touch on this because Senator Blumenthal, of course, is such a gun control nut that everything he cares about is just related to taking away our Second Amendment rights. He had said something today, and I wanted to kind of share that because he as he was talking to Amy Coney Barrett, one of the things he did was try to quote one of her cases, or at least that's what he alluded to. Okay, at one point he was saying that Amy Coney Barrett in the Kanter v. Barr case had called her own decision radical. Now, for those of you who don't know, let me tell you a little bit about the Kanter v. Barr case, and I'm gonna play the video where she talks about it in her own words. But essentially, in Kanter v. Barr, Kanter, the defendant in the case, was convicted of selling. It was actually Medicare fraud, and the purpose behind the Medicare fraud was that he was selling shoe inserts that did not meet the Medicaid standard. Now, what happened was initially they told him that your inserts don't meet the Medicare standard, so he re-engineered the inserts and resubmitted those to Medicare, and Medicare said, okay, yeah, these are good. Once they had approved his new inserts, he continued to sell what he had left of the ones that were not approved by Medicare and still claimed them on Medicare. And so he was eventually convicted of Medicare fraud, which is a felony, and that's where this case come up. Well, one of the things he argued was the fact that he was a felon, a nonviolent felon, but he had no right to keep and bear arms. And that's the case that was before the Seventh Circuit. It was a panel decision of 3 attorneys, and 2 of the 3 attorneys upheld the constitutionality of the law that prevented felons from being able to keep and bear arms. Well, Barrett was the one dissenter in the case, and she had made some claims in the case about whether she thinks it's constitutional for there to be a blanket ban on all felons from being able to exercise their Second Amendment rights. And I agree with her. I don't think there should be. I think the fact that just because you wear that label of felon doesn't mean that you should have your rights removed. I'm a little more sympathetic to the argument about violent felons and whether or not they should have their rights removed. But I also think after a certain amount of time, even violent felons, if they go a certain amount of time without committing another act of violence, should also regain those rights as well. I think if you're safe enough, if the government and society thinks you're safe enough to be in public, then you should be safe enough to have all your rights reinstated. Otherwise, if the government doesn't think you're safe to be among society, then they should keep you in jail. Once government has deemed that you are safe enough to be in society, and society has deemed that through the selection of their representatives, then you shouldn't be. You should still be in jail, or if you're safe, you should be set free. So here's what Senator Blumenthal
said.
Kanter
versus Barr.
Amy Coney Barrett. Amy, I don't know why, there's probably a setting here I need to stop.
In fact, you characterize it as
I don't know why it continues to play. I'm hitting stop here.
It is, in effect, an outlier.
Reset.
So,
all right, let me do it this way then. It's starting by itself. So as soon as I click over there, apparently it's just going to go ahead and start. I'll figure this thing out, I promise. Here's what Blumenthal said during this hearing, and then I will come back and talk a little bit about that, all right? Sorry about that. I'm sure you guys are gonna get me on that. All right, here we go. This is today between Senator Blumenthal and Amy Coney Barrett.
Sure. So Kanter versus Barr was a case in which the defendant,
Justice Scalia
he had been convicted of Medicaid fraud. He had he had sold shoe inserts that didn't actually comply with right standards, and then been gotten money from it. It was fraud, and he had served his sentence.
I think you said,
under federal law, those who've been convicted of a felony, of any felony, lose their gun rights.
To say
so they can't
felons can have firearms. That's a direct quote.
So Kanter argued that he wasn't a threat.
Language.
You know, this was his only conviction. It wasn't a violent crime.
I'm not,
he had discharged his sentence. He didn't use illegal substances. He was stable. He had a job. He was married. And time had passed
we can
since
look it
this
up.
conviction, and he was not a
fine,
recidivist.
Senator. I
So
don't
he
think you're making
argued
it up.
that it was
Trust me.
unconstitutional
I'll
to
check it
deprive
and
him
look
of
it
his
up,
Second
but I know
Amendment
that's
right
not the thrust of your
to
question.
possess a
Sounds kind of
firearm,
radical because it is.
because he did not pose any danger.
Radical. In fact,
And the 3-judge
no
panel,
courts
2 of my
of appeals,
colleagues,
except maybe
rejected
the
that claim
Seventh Circuit
and said that the
has
Second
adopted
Amendment
this
doesn't
reasoning.
preclude.
The Third Circuit, I think,
in
has a
Kanter's
rule
case, there was both
The
the
Third
state
Circuit.
statute
Any
from
others?
Wisconsin and then a
I
federal
don't know that it's
statute
come up
I
in
knew
a-
there was
that
one
made it
circuit that
illegal
did. I
for
wasn't sure
felons
which one.
to possess
We were-
arms.
My position
So
was
the majority
consistent
said
with a Third
that was
Circuit en banc
constitutional,
decision that had already been decided.
and I wrote a dissent saying that it was unconstitutional. It's
All right. That kind of went into the second video there. So what he's saying is that Amy Coney Barrett in this decision says that she had called her own decision kind of radical, and he gave this illusion that in the Kanter case, he gave this illusion that it came straight from that decision. I had read when I found out that Donald Trump was going to be possibly recommending Amy Barrett to the Supreme Court, I went and I looked up in LexisNexis all of her cases that she had decided in the Seventh Circuit. And I wanted to understand where she fell on some very important issues, specifically the Second Amendment. And I only found one case, and that was the case that Blumenthal is talking about right here, which is the Kanter v. Barr case. And I read the decision, and I read her dissent, and her dissent is probably at least double the length of the opinion of the other two. So the opinion was it's perfectly constitutional to strip all felons of their rights. And shoot, did that not work? That they're able to talk over each other. I'm sorry, that they can strip over felons out of their rights. And that's not what she thought. So I read the case and I thought, as I'm watching this live, I'm thinking, I don't remember anywhere where she calls in this case this decision of being radical. So I pulled out my copy because I did print it out and I've got it highlighted like crazy. And I couldn't find the word radical anywhere. And so I thought, okay, this is long. Maybe I just can't see it. So I pulled it up on LexisNexis. And what I'll do is, actually, I'll tell you what I'll do here is bring up my screen capture here. Let's do it that way. So y'all can see it as well. There we go. And this is the case, Kanter v. Barr, right here. Okay, it was decided in 2019, and it originally was argued apparently on September 7th of 2018. Oh, what happened? Where'd it go? Come back. Oh, there we go. And what I did was I did a search, right? A word search for the word radical. Okay, 0, right here, 0. The word radical doesn't show up anywhere. Now, what I can do is go straight to the dissent. And that's what I'm going to try to do here. Where dissent. I can scroll all the way down. Where's the Barrett dissent? Opinion. Come on. Usually there's a little link here to the dissent. Where's my link? All right, let's just jump to the dissent. Dissent by. There we go. All right. So here's the dissent by Judge Barrett. She says that it's a really good case. I don't know if you can pull this up normally. If you don't have LexisNexis, I'm sure it's out there somewhere. All you've got to do is type in this citation right here, Kanter v. Barr, 919 F 3D 437, and that's federal 3rd district, and figure out it's under the 7th Court of Appeals, and here's the date up here. All right, so there's that. What now? Whoops, crap. I'm trying to figure all this stuff out. So what I really want to show you guys is what I found out where this came from, this idea of radicalism, that that this decision that she made in Kanter v. Barr was radical, and it's here we go again.
So
your opinion in
no,
Kanter,
I don't want you, Blumenthal. I want you to shut up. Stop.
Farther than
you know what? Okay,
Justice
let's do it
Scalia
this way
and
then.
Heller. In fact, you.
All right, now we'll shut you up. This is what she said. So she was actually speaking to Hillsdale College, and she was asked about this. And this video is about 4 minutes long, but I want to play the entire 4 minutes because it's important to get the context. And apparently she did say that it might appear that her dissent in this case, in this Kanter case, is radical. But listen to exactly what she says, because first of all, Blumenthal is trying to say that is trying to make it sound as if she thought that her idea of felons carrying guns is radical, when in fact that's not what she believed. So here is the clip. It's about I pulled out a 4-minute clip where she's talking to Hillsdale College about judicial philosophy and stuff like that, and is specifically asked about her decision in Kanter v. Barr, and she's going to explain a little bit of that. Hopefully this works. Again, this is my inaugural, I will learn how to do OBS a little bit better. So this is a trial and error thing. I apologize. Here we go.
Sure. So Kanter versus Barr was a case in which the defendant, he had been convicted of Medicaid fraud. He had sold shoe inserts that didn't actually comply with the right standards, and then been refunded, gotten money for them anyway. it was fraud and he had served his sentence, but under federal law, those who've been convicted of a felony, of any felony, lose their gun rights, and so they can't possess a gun thereafter. So Kanter argued that he wasn't a threat. This was his only conviction. It wasn't a violent crime. He had discharged his sentence. He didn't use illegal substances. He was stable. He had a job. He was married, and time had passed since this conviction, and he was not a recidivist. So he argued that it was unconstitutional to deprive him of his Second Amendment right to possess a firearm because he did not pose any danger. And the three-judge panel, two of my colleagues rejected that claim and said that the Second Amendment doesn't preclude, in Kanter's case, there was both a state statute from Wisconsin and then a federal statute that made it illegal for felons to possess guns. So the majority said that that was constitutional, and I wrote a dissent saying that it was unconstitutional. It's unusual at the Court of Appeals level to encounter a case which requires a deep dive into founding era documents, because at the Court of Appeals level, so many of cases have already been decided by the Supreme Court that you're typically applying precedent. You're applying Supreme Court precedent. But the Second Amendment is newer territory. The Supreme Court decided Heller versus United States, Heller versus District of Columbia, not that long ago, and it hasn't. It's only taken one other Second Amendment case since then, so there's just not a lot of precedent out there. So I had to do a pretty deep dive into the history of the Second Amendment, and Heller, the Supreme Court case, is pretty clear about the fact that the scope of the Second Amendment needs to be determined by its history. And I concluded, after surveying all of the arguments, the historically based arguments for the constitutionality of depriving felons of their right to possess firearms, that there was no blanket authorization to just take guns, the right to possess a gun away from someone who had committed a felony. That sounds kind of radical to say felons can have firearms, but I think it's because what the longstanding prohibitions were, and in fact had been even under federal law until more recently, was that violent felons couldn't have firearms. And there's a longstanding, what the history showed me is that there's been a longstanding practice of saying that those who pose a threat of violence to the community cannot have firearms. And that makes sense, right? History is consistent with common sense. Those who would be risky with guns, who would pose danger with guns, then the state can take guns away. But in the instance of someone who the state has not shown that the person has demonstrated any risk, the mere status of having committed a felony, I found no historical support for saying that the state was then justified in taking it away. So, as I said in that opinion, if the state had evidence that Mr. Kanter would have posed some threat of violence if he'd had a gun, then that would be a different situation. But the mere fact that someone had committed a felony wasn't enough. And, overcriminalization gets a lot of talk these days. And when you look at the number of things that are felonies, you can, it's a felony. Now I'm kind of talking off the hip, and I'll see if I can remember exactly which state it was. I think it was Massachusetts. Selling pigs without a license, returning out-of-state bottles for deposits in Michigan can be a felony when it's over a certain amount. And so there's not really a limit on what states can choose to define as felonies. And so it seems a little bit odd to say that the scope of one's Second Amendment right would depend on what a state chooses to define as a felony or not.
All right, so there you have it. And she talked about the fact that it sounds radical, but it really isn't, unless you are a radical, and this is my words, unless you are a radical gun control advocate. There's nothing radical about thinking that someone who is, she brought up some great points about if feeding certain pigs or whatever, or selling a certain kind of pig. If that's the standard of what constitutes a felony, and if I'm not mistaken, really, if it's anything that the sentence is more than a year in prison. And so a felon can't have a firearm. And what she's trying to say, which is a very valid argument, because if you read Kanter v. Barr, she makes very clear with historical precedent that the intent of the founders, now keep in mind, Amy Kanter Barrett was a law clerk for Scalia, who's an originalist. And what an originalist does is it looks at the Constitution at the time it was passed and associates what the intent was of the founders. The intent of the founders at the time of the Second Amendment was that it shall not be infringed. If you are an objective person, there was a comment made that RAS makes that was absolutely correct, that if you care about the Second Amendment, you don't take guns away from the people, you take the people away from the guns. Because a person who commits a felony that has nothing to do with violence, what makes you think that person's going to be violent? Now, what I would posit is this. The law as it is right now that turns any felon into a second-hand citizen because you lose your right to vote, you lose all your benefits, your federal benefits. For example, you're not able to get school loans, you're not able to get home loans, you're not able to exercise your Second Amendment rights, but yet you're able to have all these other rights. So it delineates the Second Amendment to a second-hand right. And what's important to note here is she's making very clear that, and I'm not sure I necessarily agree, but look, I would think that anybody who thinks objectively also understands that even the founders did not intend for violent people who are only going to use their firearms or use any tool to attack others. Nobody can agree that anyone has a right to use a firearm or a hammer or whatever as an action against another person. Okay, nobody should agree with that. So if somebody is a threat, we have to look at it in one of two ways. Either this person is so mental that they can't be trusted with a firearm and they haven't been convicted of a crime that they can't have a gun. And if that's the case, that person shouldn't be in public. Because just because you pass a law that a person as a felon can't have a firearm, what's to stop them from killing someone with something else? It's like this. This is how I equate this idea of taking away guns from felons. You have a guy who's an arsonist, and he's walking around. He's got a can of gasoline and a torch lighter. Okay. And you say, you know what, arsonists can't have gasoline. And so you walk up to the guy and you take away his gasoline. Well, he's still got a lighter. Okay, you still got a flint and steel that you can use. There are plenty of ways to start fires. But if you truly think that this guy is a danger to starting fires, you don't leave him in public where there are so many ways to start fires. It's the same thing with people you think are too dangerous to be in society to have guns, that they shouldn't be in society, but they need to be adjudicated. All right, they've got a right to due process. You don't just, unlike these red flag laws, you don't just say, well, we think this guy is a danger because we've ticked off these things, or a neighbor has complained, and so we're going to go ahead and take that person's guns because he might commit a crime. That's what the court system is for. You can't go around taking away people's rights just because you think they might be a threat. What I'm talking about are dangerous people who have been convicted of dangerous crimes, of violent crimes, of murder, of aggravated assault, of using a firearm to try and kill somebody. All right, if those people, what we need to do is make the current penalties for using a firearm to commit a crime much more harsh so that we're not letting these people out. And if we think at the end of their sentence that we can let them out, then we need to evaluate, are they going to commit a crime? And that's what Amy Coney Barrett is talking about. And she, in the decision, as a matter of fact, I've got it right here. There are parts in there where she really does go into the historical aspect of our founders and what they were talking about when it had something to do with taking away guns from felons. And so she brought in things that bore into the Second Amendment. And one of those was there was in New Hampshire at the convention when they were talking about the Bill of Rights, they wanted to include the following provision into the Bill of Rights. Okay, and it says Congress. This is when they were trying to debate how are we going to go about writing the Second Amendment. And the New Hampshire Convention submitted this language: Congress shall never disarm any citizen unless such as are or have been in actual rebellion. Okay, and that's what the New Hampshire proposal was supposed to be about. And in the Massachusetts Convention, Sam Adams proposed to protect the right to bear arms with the following language. He said that it should read, and that the said Constitution be never construed to authorize Congress to prevent the people of the United States who are peaceable citizens from keeping their own arms, okay? So keeping arms in self-defense, essentially. You're using it for peaceful purposes. Hunting, self-defense. Obviously, if the government is being tyrannical, okay, the way you keep that peace, this is a peaceful reason. If you've got a tyrannical government that's engaged in tyranny, well, you keep the peace by overtaking that tyrannical government, okay? So even what happened in 1775 is a peaceable reason. So that was Sam Adams. In Pennsylvania, they suggested an addition that said the people have a right to keep and bear arms for the defense of themselves, their own state, or the United States for the purpose of killing game, and no law shall be passed for disarming the people or any of them unless for crimes committed or real danger of public injury from individuals. So it was very clear at the beginning, and Amy Coney Barrett made this very clear, that all of the founders, most of the founders identified that only people who were not a danger to society, or only the people who are a danger to society, should have their right to keep and bear arms taken away. Now, obviously, they settled with what we currently know as the Second Amendment, and there was still this idea. They thought that, okay, this works, all right? The proposals indicate that some common but maybe imprecise understanding that the founding fathers regarded the boundaries of a right to keep and bear arms. There was a boundary, and that boundary was a threat to public safety. That means people who would use guns to hurt other people, okay? And she went into all of this. And so she also talks about, at the time, peaceable was defined free from war, free from tumult, and these are quotes, quiet, undisturbed, not violent, not bloody, not quarrelsome, not turbulent, okay? It had nothing to do with selling insoles that were essentially nothing more than an administrative idea of what qualified for Medicaid reimbursement for insoles, okay? They had to be a certain thickness. Kanter didn't have that certain thickness, and he sold these insoles, and now he's a felon. Remember, felonies were much different back then. It used to be that felonies were prosecuted by death, all felonies. If the punishment was death, pretty much all crimes, you're punishable by death. That's how they dealt with you. That's just not the case anymore. Felonies are much more nuanced and much more complex today than they were back then. And every state creates their own idea of what a felony is, okay? And Blumenthal isn't smart enough to understand that. Blumenthal took this was like an hour and a half long speech, okay, and this was a question and answer part of that speech, and took it down to essentially 3 or 4 words, which are that she said her opinion might seem radical. No, it seems radical to people who think that there's a right to keep and bear arms. It seems radical, and this is what she's talking about, because we have, as a society, have been brainwashed into thinking, and you talk, look, go into any gun rights group on social media. Talk to the average gun guy, okay, that isn't involved necessarily in activism, but believes in the Second Amendment, right, for self-defense or whatever. And even they have been so brainwashed by the government and by the media into thinking that, oh, we've got to keep guns out of the hands of felons, because it sounds good, right? And I'm sure the intent of the law was to keep guns out of the hands of violent people who just don't understand how to be responsible and not kill people with them. Murder, homicide. Not what we have today. From the 1960s, when this law was passed, until today, the number of felonies has increased tenfold. There are so many different, there's a book out there, 3 felonies a day. You don't even realize it. In some places, if you grow too much wheat, it's a felony. If you don't pasteurize your milk properly, it's a felony. And as a farmer, that's why I've got those kinds of examples there. It's a felony, but that is not what was intended. But that is what is intended when it relates to people like Blumenthal, because they don't want to stop at just felons, okay? Initially, the way they sold the law was, we've got to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous individuals. So we're going to pass this law that felons can't have guns. The assumption and the intent is to keep guns out of the hands of felons. However, what ended up happening is it kept guns out of the hands of all felons. This is the same thing that happened in Texas. When Texas passed its Article 1, its Second Amendment right, Section 23, Article 1, Section 23, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, but the legislature shall have the right, shall have the authority by law to regulate the wearing of arms. When this was originally passed, the intent was it was only going to be applied to the newly freed slaves. The law was out there. I'm sorry, when 46, not the Section 23, but when or Penal Code Section 4601 was passed that banned guns in the hands of Texans, it was passed with the idea of disarming blacks, okay? And that's initially how the law was enforced. It was initially enforced by only applying to black people. And then over time, as we got further away from when the law was originally passed, it started getting applied to everybody, as it should, because the language of the law would make you think that it should apply to everybody, but that wasn't the intent. So they got away from the intent. Now it does apply to everyone. And look, it had racist origins. It doesn't have a racist effect right now, as it should not. I said shouldn't, but you guys, we've got those people out there, those haters. Should not have any racial inclination whatsoever. That's the exact same thing that has happened with the felon bar, okay, the bar to felons having guns. Initially, it was about keeping the guns out of the hands of violent people, and it spread to keeping guns out of the hands of all felons. People like Blumenthal, the reason that they keyed in on this word radical is because she recognizes, Barrett, that the general public, when they hear, oh my gosh, Barrett wants felons to have guns, it's because they've been brainwashed into thinking that felons are violent people. And that's not the case. Martha Stewart is a felon. Does anyone think that she's violent? No. But people like Blumenthal want not just felons, but they want to get rid of, they've expanded that. It's not just felonies anymore. Now it's domestic assault, domestic abuse, potential domestic abuse. They want it expanded to the no-fly list, which there's no due process for the no-fly list whatsoever. They want it expanded to so many things. Blumenthal will not stop until the only people that have guns are the government and the criminals, of course. All right? And that's why Blumenthal did what he did. I wanted to show you guys this video. I wanted to go back and really call that out, because Blumenthal lied to the American people, and he even confused Judge Barrett. It's interesting. She's answering all these questions, and she's rattling off these cases all day long without notes in front of her. They asked her at one point, can you show us the notes that you're reading off of? And she showed her notepad, and it looked like this. I can't show my notepad because this is my my conflicts notepad, but let's just say she opened up her notepad, and it was blank. She wasn't using notes, unlike the senators. And Coney called this out. And senators are so stupid, they can't think intelligently without being told what to think. And so they have to have notebooks and binders and all this other kind of stuff when they are interrogating a Supreme Court justice nominee. And that's exactly what happened. So there you go. There you have it. I wanted to give you the full context. Please share this video, like this video. If you can, I'm going to do more of these. Once I figure out how to use this software a little bit better, I'll probably produce a few more of these that are not as long. I wanted to keep this to 30 minutes, and I went about 5 minutes over that. Really quick, let me check and see if there are any questions that I might have missed in the chat. I'm going to scroll through these really fast. Hey, Shay Callie, how are you? I'm your biggest fan too. Shay's awesome. I wish you'd put out more videos there, Shay. You need to put out more videos. You cracked me up. Okay, no questions there. How dare she speak to Hillsdale? Exactly. That's really the problem. The problem was she spoke to Hillsdale. All right, getting down to the bottom of the chat here. I don't see very many questions. Scalia's 6 nuclear words become focal and central to the gun rights arguments. The Second Amendment is no different. You're absolutely right. The Second Amendment is not a secondary right. When, I don't understand how a felon, first of all, you can lose your Second Amendment right, but not any other. I would argue that your First Amendment right is just as dangerous because look what happens. People have been using their First Amendment right to organize, to loot, commit arson, and destroy communities using their First Amendment right. So that's just as dangerous. Why is it that felons get to exercise their First Amendment rights? Let's see. I'm sorry. I'm just going through here. I want to make sure. I know there's a big lag between me talking and when this actually airs. Okay, I think I got this. Yes, RES, I would love to do that. It would probably have to be either during a summer or after I graduate law school because I'm actually stressing out that I'm even doing this video. I just felt this passionate about it because I should be studying. I've got conflicts I've got to read. I've got my constitutional law tomorrow. I've got criminal procedure tomorrow. I've got evidence law tomorrow, and I've got criminal practice tomorrow. And that means I've got about 100 pages I need to read. Now, I've read some of those, so I'm not that far behind, but I do have a lot of stuff I need to read, and I could have done that over the last 40 minutes instead of make this video. Yes, that's exactly it. 1, 2, 3. If they've paid their debt to society, they should get all the rights back. All right, guys, take care, be safe. Be free. I'm sorry for the sort of jagged way this video went out there. I do like this OBS software. I'll have to talk to some friends of mine who are also activists that probably use this software and how they do it. I'm not sure if it'd be more effective doing it live this way or recording videos using OBS. But I do prefer the live method because when I do it live, nothing's edited. People see me for who I am. I can be wrong or I can be right. I can't edit out mistakes or things I don't want you to see. And I prefer it that way because it's more raw. And you see that I actually know what I'm talking about instead of, researching what I'm going to say, cut, researching what I'm going to say next, cut, and doing it in little snippets. I prefer to do it live because it shows a little bit better who I am and the fact that I actually understand what I'm talking about. All right. Again, y'all take care. Be safe and be free. I'm going to stop this, and I'll see you on the other side. If you can, please like and share this video. Let people know I'm banned now on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, so I can't share this there. I can't go and announce that I'm going to be online anywhere, except I am on Freedom Lake. Check out freedomlake.com. That's where I've moved the Facebook type presence. I tried Wimkin and I tried MeWe. I just don't like those platforms. And Freedom Lake was started by a patriot. He's a guy that I know, and a lot of the applications in Freedom Lake are very similar to Facebook. So there's not a big learning curve on trying to figure out the software and how it works. He's updating it all the time. He's asked me how to improve it. I've helped with a few improvements. And so I'm only on Freedom Lake and Parler. So Parler is like the equivalent of Twitter, and Freedom Lake is the equivalent of Facebook. Those are the only two places I'm going to be now since I'm banned everywhere else. Again, I've got a MeWe account, but you're not going to see me there. I've got a Gab account. You're not going to see me there. I've got a Wimkin account. You're not going to see me there. I've tried all of those, and I honestly think that even though Freedom Lake is a smaller platform at this point, I think it's a better platform that moving forward is probably the best option, especially if you're used to Facebook-style interactions. I can create pages, I can create groups, and all that kind of stuff. So check out freedomlake.com. It's free speech. Okay, you can say anything. I've had some friends in there even test it by saying things that would probably get them banned anywhere else just for the sole purpose of saying it. And they have not banned those people or deleted those statements. Obviously, if you're trying to commit crimes, it's probably going to get deleted like anywhere. But there you go. All right, I'm literally ending it this time. Y'all be safe, be free, and share this video. If you can donate, please do. Underneath the video, I've got some of my places where you can donate. And what that does is it kind of helps me to get things like better software, a better microphone. I would like to buy a microphone here pretty soon. And those kinds of donations help with that since I'm not doing a lot of activism in the streets. All right, I'm out. Bye.